Welcome to Clarity, a podcast powered by the Thomson Reuters Institute. I'm Zach Warren, the Institute's Technology and Innovation Insights lead. In each episode, we dive deep into a single question from decision makers and thought leaders from legal, corporate, tax accounting and audit, and government communities. In today's episode, we discuss the big question: where is the landscape on crypto going into 2025? It may be a simple question, but the answers could not be more complex. The current Trump administration has placed more of an emphasis on cryptocurrencies than ever before, with President Trump appointing a crypto czar and promising to make the United States the, quote, crypto capital of the world. But with those proclamations comes necessary questions about regulatory oversight, new rules compliance, and what this all means for corporate risk and fraud. As we enter the new crypto paradigm, it's more important than ever to keep up with the latest guidance. And to help you on your way, here is the Thomson Reuters Institute's Rabia Butler with today's guests.
Hello, and welcome to Clarity. I'm Rabia Butler with Thomson Reuters Institute. Today we will be exploring a topic of significant interest: the future of cryptocurrency in 2025. The crypto sector is evolving rapidly, and as we approach this new era, it is crucial to consider the potential direction this digital frontier may take. I am joined here by Caitlin from Chainalysis and Sophia from Guha PLLC. Please note that the information that we're discussing should not be construed as legal or financial advice. The insights that we're sharing are here and based on our personal experience and expertise and reflect our individual opinions. Hello, ladies. How are you?
Good, thank you. Thanks for having us on the podcast today.
Thank you, Rabia.
So, if you guys want to just give us a little bit of background about who you are before we kind of get into the meat and bones of what we're talking about today.
Sure. Sophia, you want to go first?
Sure thing. I'll go first. My name's Sophia Keeler. I'm an attorney at Guha PLLC, and my practice focuses on crypto regulation and compliance, as well as government enforcement investigations in the space. So I'm very excited to be here today, share some insights on what I've learned from my experiences in the crypto industry and working with clients in that space, as well as talk a bit about what we're likely to see in the new administration.
And I'm Caitlin Barnett. I'm the Director of Regulation and Compliance at Chainalysis, which is a blockchain analytics firm. I've been with the company for 4 years, where I work really closely with both our public and private sector customers navigating this ever fun changing world of crypto compliance. But prior to joining Chainalysis, I worked at 2 of the major cryptocurrency exchanges. I was the Deputy Chief Compliance Officer at Gemini Trust Company for 3 years, and then Chief Compliance Officer at Bitstamp USA for 2 years. And before jumping into the fun, crazy world of crypto in 2016, I worked within traditional finance and a number of legal and compliance roles. So really happy to be here and chat with both of you ladies.
So clearly we have the most qualified panel right now. And as we approach 2025 and kind of march forward in it, it's important to reflect on our current position. Since Bitcoin's inception, the cryptocurrency landscape has undergone substantial changes. Blockchain technology has brought about significant advancements across various industries. Decentralized finance is posing challenges to traditional banking systems, and non-fungible tokens are reshaping concept of ownership and creativity. I'd like our audience to sit back and enjoy us as we delve into this intriguing domain. Whether you're an experienced crypto enthusiast or just exploring the topic in this dynamic field, our discussion aims to provide you some valuable insights and some clarity to everyone. So, with that said, we're about 2 months into this administration, and what are we hoping would change with this new administration as it pertains to crypto in general?
Sure. And I'm happy to start off on that one, Caitlin, if that's all right.
Yeah, of course.
I think we're likely to see, and we're already in the process of seeing this, a series of significant changes from the prior administration. I think it's pretty clear that there's been this 180 in terms of, let's say, crypto government enforcement actions and investigations. Clearly focusing in on stopping a series of investigations that have been, that were hotly contested within the crypto field on a series of exchanges like Coinbase and Kraken, as well as OpenSea, MetaMask, etc. So I think that what we're likely to see and continue to see is a rollback of the significant investigations that we saw at the exchange level, likely a 180 in terms of what we saw with this regulation by enforcement approach that we had previously seen with the SEC and the CFTC, and more of a focus on legislation proposals. So the President's Working Group on Digital Assets and Markets, chaired by crypto czar Sachs, was given 180 days to propose a regulatory and legislative framework for digital assets. So that's likely to come sometime in the coming months. I think we're likely to see legislative proposals regarding stablecoins. The Genius Act has been proposed already. And then we're also likely to see either a new iteration of Fit 21, which was passed in the House last year, or something similar thereof in the coming months, about regulating and really clearly defining when digital assets fall under the SEC's framework and jurisdiction, or the CFTC's, or something else altogether. So I think in the coming months, we'll see some legislative proposals. We'll see less of an emphasis on government enforcement investigations. And I think we'll start to see a really clear regulatory perimeter and delineation about which agencies have proper jurisdiction here. And perhaps get quite a bit of clarity as we see the crypto task force that's been set up by Commissioner Peirce. But I'd love to hear your thoughts, Caitlin.
Yeah, I think you nailed the biggest change in my personal opinion, is that we're hopefully going to move from this regulation through enforcement and actually have clear regulation for the industry. Unfortunately, a number of the exchanges have undergone a number of investigations, and it's been really challenging for the industry. And I think what has happened is it's brought a lack of a good reputation for the traditional financial institutions to gain entry within this marketplace. Most recently, we saw the OCC come out this past week and provide some clarity, which I think is really exciting for the traditional financial institutions to, start to offer crypto custody. One of the major sectors that I talk to on a daily basis are the traditional financial institutions, and they're constantly trying to figure out, can we get into this space? They really want to get into it. They have consumer demand, but they have been really hesitant based on, the prior guidance given out from the OCC. So I think we're already starting to see a major shift in just the perception of crypto, that there is a way to confidently and compliantly interact with this asset class. And if we can get clear regulation, and we can get the regulatory bodies to agree with what they are responsible for regulating, I think there's a clear path forward for a number of participants that have not gained entry into this system to start to offer different products to their consumers.
That is all very interesting. Um, I wanted to move a little bit into a compliance area. Compliance is an integral part of supporting new products and initiatives within banks and other financial institutions. How do you think about crypto compliance specifically, uh, especially as we move, as you said, Caitlin, from regulation by enforcement to a more clear outline regulatory stance?
So I live and breathe this every single day. And, a lot of others don't have that luxury. And so I don't take that lightly, specifically when it comes to regulators. I think we often forget that regulators are not, living, breathing crypto 24/7, like a lot of us in the industry. So I try to remind myself of that oftentimes when there is frustration, that we don't feel as if things are moving fast enough, because crypto probably moves faster than any other industry I've ever been a part of. But I think the biggest thing that I have realized is that education is a huge part of crypto. And so a lot of what we're doing at Chainalysis is educating people on how you can utilize blockchain analytics to enhance your compliance program so that you can offer new and exciting products to your customers. So I think, unfortunately, crypto has had a really negative reputation since inception. And the minute we start to gain some good footing, something bad happens, like FTX, for example. And I think all the good progress that we have made, it kind of takes us backwards. So it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But when you really look at entering into offering a crypto product, it's no different than any other new technology or new product, right? It all starts for me with your risk assessment. Anytime you offer a new product within traditional financial services, you have to do a risk assessment and understand where your risks are and what controls you can put in place. And then once those controls are put in place, what risks still remain. So we talk a lot about the use of blockchain analytics, obviously, because we're a blockchain analytics company. And for those, listening to the podcast that might not be familiar with what Chainalysis does, we're providing real world identities at the entity level to the blockchain. So when you look at the blockchain, you're typically seeing a bunch of alphanumeric mumbo jumbo. And there are these pseudonymous addresses, which is why crypto has this reputation of being anonymous. But it couldn't be further from the truth. When you're dealing in crypto, everything lives on the ledger indefinitely. So you can't erase a transaction, which is much different from the traditional financial sector. So using blockchain analytics is super powerful because you're giving compliance officers the ability to quickly and clearly see where funds are coming from or where they're going to. And in addition, we're not just limited to direct interactions from a blockchain perspective. You can see where they have come from indirectly. So in traditional finance, we're limited to wire details and ACH information, and you can only see where the funds have come from or have gone to from bank to bank, essentially. But when you're using blockchain analytics within crypto, you can trace all the way out to the last known service. So again, at Chainalysis, we're providing identities of both good entities and bad entities, but we're also enabling our customers to utilize this technology to make sure that it's within their own risk appetite. So we're never going to tell you that company A is bad or company B is good. You're able to make it, your decisions in line with your own risk appetite, which I think is really, really important to compliance officers. And I think it's really important as we continue to evolve, the regulations and policies and procedures within the crypto industry, that everyone is able to tailor and make those decisions. When you first potentially get into the crypto industry, you might take a more risk averse approach because it is a newer technology and we've seen some negative things happen. But then once you get more comfortable with any customer, just like any customer you're onboarding, you might loosen those restrictions. So I think we are still very, very early days within crypto, especially within the compliance game. I've been in it since 2016, so I'm obviously really passionate about it, and I'm really excited about what's to come. But Sophia would love your take on this as well.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with all of that. I think one of the misconceptions with crypto compliance is that it's necessarily 100% unique, and that there's, you're operating in the Wild West and you're unsure perhaps what rules apply. And I think one of the important things is to sort of have grounding principles of compliance. When we think about compliance, what are things we need to have? AML procedures, KYC. In addition to basics like retention policies. This is something that I've seen come up so often in my work when you have regulators asking simple questions of, well, what retention policies do you have in place? And people think, well, because I'm not operating as a MSB or in the traditional finance space, I don't have to have 8 years of retention policy of retention for our documents. And that may be true. You may not need 8 years, but you need to have some system in place, some idea that for some period of years, there's a general accessible place internally where you can access documents, you can access emails and communication. So I think when I think about crypto compliance, I always think about the grounding principles of what does compliance mean. You want to make sure that you have certain sets of things for accountability, for privacy, for making sure that customer assets and customer information is secured. And I think if you keeping in mind those grounding principles help to move the needle forward from crypto is so scary and so new to, okay, what are the things that we need to have, and then adopt them to the technology. So, the one of the things that Caitlin hit the nail on the head on is that, yes, we have blockchain technology that allows us to track where various transactions are. It helps us do our KYC and helps us track for AML purposes. And I think if we keep that open mind of we're adopting basic principles to new technology, it helps steer the conversation into a more manageable array of tasks and things to keep in mind, if that's helpful.
No, it's super helpful. And I think you brought up a really good point that really frustrated me when I first got into this industry. There were a number of companies that were very clearly MSBs, and there were really clear guidelines as to what you were required to do as an MSB. But because they were crypto companies, they didn't think they were responsible for those basic AML, KYC, BSA requirements. And so to me, I didn't know anything about crypto when I got into this space in 2016. I got in it completely accidentally, if I'm being completely honest. And so when I got to Gemini, I had come from the traditional financial sector. So I just applied those same basic principles that I learned at the traditional financial sector over to the crypto companies. And so when we were getting questions from regulators and we were getting examined by various states, we had really solid policies and procedures because we were doing everything the same way that traditional financial institutions were. And then, in early days of crypto, you saw a number of these exchanges getting in trouble for not having basic KYC information. And to me, they acted so surprised that they were required to have this. And again, it goes back to this misnomer that crypto is all anonymous, and it's, in my opinion, completely the opposite. Crypto again has a bad rap, and we're still seeing bad actors like Lazarus Group utilize crypto for nefarious activity. But it's still all maintained on the blockchain. And so it's so much easier to trace. It's so much easier to seize. In my personal opinion, I think cash will always be king when it comes to criminal and illicit activity.
So, what it seems like is that we have a lot of uncertainty, and that can breed excitement. So, I'm wondering what excites you about the new administration and their openness to crypto. And Sophia, I guess we can start with you on that. What excites you?
So one of the things that I'm super excited about for this new era of crypto is seeing, crypto talent and innovation coming back to the United States. I think, unfortunately, with that regulation by enforcement approach that we had seen previously, it scared a lot of people abroad, and it also shut down a lot of innovation that was happening here. I saw that, personally and professionally through various clients that were afraid to engage in crypto related or crypto, adjacent projects in the US because of fear of unfair or unjust or unclear regulation. And I do think that the era we are now, perhaps, we can have some course correcting with that. We're already seeing, for example, Coinbase just announced recently after the crypto summit that they're hiring 1,000 more people. And so think of it. I see it as an opportunity to for innovation and for excitement, and I think that that's sort of stimulating a lot of public perception also around it. So because crypto is becoming so mainstream nowadays, I'm afraid to venture into the topic of meme coins, but we'll even take just like the meme coin dropped by the president and the first lady. I think that helped sort of bring this public awareness to certain aspects of crypto that were just previously just mainly for the crypto native individuals. So I do think we're seeing this more mainstream adoption and public awareness of crypto, less of a fear of it being, tied to illicit activities, to it having some sort of real world utility in addition to some sort of real world interaction with the, let's take the meme coins, for example, of interacting with people beyond just the financial aspects of crypto, but also the novelty of, the collector items that are meme coins, especially since the SEC did just make make an announcement that meme coins are not securities, which I also think is pretty interesting. I think we're going to see a new era of the way that the public interacts with various aspects of the blockchain, and excitement about that. But Caitlin, I'd love to hear from your perspective, what you think is exciting about the new times we're in.
Yeah, so I think, the fact that it is more friendly is the most exciting. I also think, like, taking a step back to the election in general, this was the first time that we had both parties using crypto as a platform, which was amazing. So, to Sophia's point, crypto has become mainstream for sure, and it's only becoming more mainstream. I mean, I'm always very hesitant when I'm at like family gatherings or I'm meeting new people to tell people what I do because you inevitably get, a whole host of really interesting questions. So sometimes I just say I'm in compliance or I'm a lawyer. Now it's a little bit easier to have that conversation because you can't turn on the news these days without hearing something about crypto. And for once, it's not always negative. Now, we recently just had a pretty big hack, and that was really negative. But to spin that a little bit, I think again we've seen the power of crypto and the power of this industry at large, like coming together to combat a hack like that and working together and starting to freeze and seize all funds there. So it is starting to have a more positive story behind it. The fact that we have people within this administration dedicated to figuring out crypto is super exciting to me. I do think it's still, DC, and things are going to move slowly. So I think it would be foolish of us to expect that, within a couple weeks, we're going to have a whole new regulatory framework and everything is going to be figured out. I don't think that's going to happen. And I don't think it should. Crypto moves so quickly that if we don't, think about this and have really thoughtful regulation, it's going to be obsolete within 2 weeks, right? Because we'll come up with the next version of whatever a meme coin is. Every year I joke around, there's like a word of the year. And in 2021, 22 timeframe, it was NFTs, right? That's all we were talking about. The next year it was stable coins. It's all we were talking about. Now I would say meme coins are up there as, one of the things we're talking about. I just had a phone call with a former colleague of mine who told me that he was talking to a company about doing crypto in space. Like the possibilities are absolutely endless. And so again, I think the thing that just excites me the most about this administration is that we seem to have an open line of communication about moving this agenda forward in a positive manner and allowing innovation to flourish in the United States rather than pushing everything offshore. Like Sophia mentioned in the beginning of her response, I think that's what we were seeing, unfortunately. And we were stifling innovation, which just isn't good for anybody.
Well, we've been overwhelmingly excuse me. We've been overwhelmingly positive, and I'd be remiss if I didn't go into fraud a little bit. So fraud continues to be an absolutely major concern in all industries, but none more than crypto. How can institutions tackle the nuances that crypto brings to this particular risk? Do you want to go first, Sophia or Caitlin?
I'll definitely start, and then would love Sophia's thoughts. So fraud is going to exist no matter what, right? And I think anytime you have a new technology, no matter what it is, fraudsters, criminals, illicit actors, they find a way to exploit it. And I kind of joke around that it's like whack-a-mole, right? The minute you figure out whatever fraud perpetrator is doing and you have a solution, they get smart to your solution and they come up with another thing, and then the game starts all over again. And so it keeps things exciting, but it's obviously really challenging to stay at the forefront of it. And with new technology like AI and things like that, that's being used for nefarious purposes as well. So I would say from the crypto perspective, one major trend that we've seen in fraud is pig butchering, unfortunately. And it's gotten really mainstream, which not a good thing that it continues to happen, but the fact that people are learning about it, I think is super important because education, in my opinion, is the only way that we can start to combat this because these fraudsters are really, really sophisticated. I'll give an example. I was at my mom's house the other day. She's 80 years old. She got a text message about her Easy Pass being overdue and she was about to click. And I was like, no, 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 that's fraud. Like Easy Pass would never text you. I've been at her house when Amazon has called her. I have a really good friend and colleague whose father, his entire Coinbase account just got wiped out recently because he fell victim for fraud. So it's just really sad because, and it's not just elderly people that are getting targeted. I should be really clear on that. We're seeing a lot of love scams where people are meeting online and they're promising investment returns and things of that nature. So there's no one set targeted audience that fraudsters are going after. They're going after everybody. And again, they're really sophisticated. The cool thing is, in my opinion, is there are ways to combat it. There are, if you strengthen your compliance programs, if you're dedicating really hard into your KYC to make sure that you're not falling victim to AI, frauds, or you're not getting fake IDs, things of that nature. That's one way to combat it. Having live humans review documentation and things of that nature, that's required. There are only so many ways that we can use technology before you do need a human to get involved. Chainalysis realized that fraud is the next evolution of where we want to get involved. So we recently made 2 acquisitions to double down in this space. One is called Alteria and the other is Hexagate. Alteria, I find both of them super interesting, but for the fraud that we were just talking about, I find Alteria to be really amazing because it combats both the fiat and the crypto side. Alteria is actually going out and interacting with these fraudsters. And so they're playing the game with them to get all the information. So they're getting the bank account information, they're getting the cryptocurrency addresses, and then they're feeding that back into our end customers so that we can proactively block this fraud. Because you can't sometimes tell somebody that they're dealing with a fraudster. They just don't want to believe it. But if you can very clearly show them documentation, nope, this is a fraudulent address, we're not going to allow you to send the funds, that's a really huge win for the industry at large. It's never going to go away, unfortunately, but I think the more education that we continue to do and the more that we utilize this new technology for good rather than evil, I think we have a really positive path forward. Sophia would love to hear your thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree that fraud is not unique to crypto, and fraud is never going to go away. It'll continue to innovate as we continue to innovate as people and as humans and as society. I think one of the misnomers about the FTX collapse is that it was unique to it being crypto, and in reality, it was just another version of regular old fraud. I think one thing that I would like to highlight is that I think one of the areas for fraud prevention is really when fiat enters and leaves the crypto ecosystem. I think that when we have, when it's crypto to crypto, when you're trading on chain, when you're going through various wallets, it without clearer regulation on what is required of those various entities where they provide, for exchanges, for example, of exchange specific regulation, in addition to whatever they're already doing for BSA, AML, KYC compliance. I think one of the strongest points for the future of combating fraud prevention, let's use that term, it is at the entry and exit points of crypto. And I say that because I think there's so many ways that we can go crypto to crypto. There are mixers, there's other things like that. But focusing in on those entry and exit points, I think are really opens an opportunity that perhaps we haven't quite nailed down what exactly we need to be looking at, but also it allows us to then track things a bit better and open our minds up that, okay, maybe it's not just thinking about we're going from wallet A to wallet B, but also eventually if somebody wants to turn that into a real world profit, wallet B cashes out to fiat. So I think that that's part of the frontier eventually of how we consider fraud prevention and tracking of persons. But I 100% agree with what Caitlin had said, and definitely on a personal level, always check and verify the emails and texts you are getting are actually from those entities. For example, like you mentioned, it's not just elderly being targeted. I got a text the other week on my iPhone saying, this is Coinbase asking you to do blah, blah, blah. And clearly that was from a fraudulent number and had no connection to Coinbase whatsoever. And I always stress that look at where your email addresses are coming from. So if it says it's Coinbase emailing you, if it says it's Chase emailing you, make sure it's actually a Chase email. It's actually a Coinbase email. It sounds simple, but it's actually really useful and preventative.
No, it's so true. And I love that you brought up that FTX was just plain fraud because, again, I think it brought us back so far and how far we had come in crypto to make great strides in legitimizing this industry. And there's a lot of arguments that were made that if FTX had been regulated by the New York Department of Financial Services, as an example, who has very stringent capital reserve requirements, does a really thorough job of looking at books and records, that this potentially could have been prevented. I mean, it's really easy to Monday morning quarterback it, so who's to say? But I do think you're 100% right, Sophia, in bringing that up, that was not a crypto specific issue. That was just plain fraud.
Gotta love when it's just plain fraud. Not, that people are victimized from it, but that it doesn't really speak ill of this new topic.
One of my favorite quotes that I keep on my desk is fraud is infinite in variety. US v. Mangan, Second Circuit, 1978.
I love
I love
that.
that. So, as we're closing out, I have two more questions. The first one, David Sachs is the new crypto and AI czar. Love the word czar. And the SEC task force will be resourcing crypto for the first time rather than just enforcing it, which is what we were talking about. How do you envision the initiatives actually playing out? And do you see it being an overall positive for the crypto industry?
So I'd love to start on this one. I think overall, I think it is a positive, and the reason why I say that is that it feels like more of an interactive discussion with stakeholders and with people in the field, than rather this, top-down approach coming from the various regulators of, all things crypto fall under the SEC jurisdiction, which is something we heard under the the prior chairman. So I think that when I think about where's the potential for good here and why it could be positive is some simple things like announcing that there'll be a series of roundtables that are open to the public and that people can and should submit questions and ideas to the SEC task force, to Commissioner Peirce. And I find that really exciting. I think that we saw that crypto summit that came out last week. While I don't think there was anything particularly unique that necessarily came out of it. I think it shows that there's this discussion with industry leaders, that the regulators and the administration is listening. And that feels a lot different than where we were this time a year or two ago, when I felt like the industry itself was just frustrated and confused. And so I think that puts us as a whole in a better situation than where we were previously. Do I know how it's going to play out? No, we don't have a crystal ball. But what I do think we'll see is those legislative proposals, is some significant things that sounds like there's an interaction and a conversation with the industry leaders themselves, versus just being told, well, tough nuggies, here's a series of enforcement actions and investigations, and deal with it. So that's exciting in some ways. I think it feels positive, and it doesn't feel like we're in this endless cycle of what do we do now? We feel like we're doing all we can. But Caitlin, what do you see as exciting or perspectives?
Yeah, so again, the fact that we have somebody in the administration that is responsible for this, I think is super exciting. I think there's a couple areas where this will be potentially great. And like Sophia said, no crystal ball, so these are all just, potential predictions. But hopefully we're going to have clear regulatory framework. And within that framework, there's the opportunity for crypto and AI synergy within policy development. So the two are so closely correlated, and AI is being implemented so much in the crypto industry that having one person oversee it, huge potential for us to get this right. I also am hopeful that we'll see some focus on consumer protection as well as fraud prevention, because again, we've been talking about that throughout, our conversation, and fraud was a huge topic that we just covered. Fraud is not unique to crypto, but again, because these newer technologies, crypto and AI, are being utilized to perpetrate fraud, hopefully having somebody on top of that, they will look at, the negative side as well and try to come up with some preventative measures. And then ideally, like, the US maybe has a seat at the global table, and we could start to develop a global crypto standard. I think that's one of the most challenging aspects of crypto, right? It's 24/7, everywhere. And the fact that these companies are tasked with, you know, complying with various regulations throughout the globe, it does become pretty costly, and it does become really challenging. So if we have one person in the United States dedicated to try and figure this out, maybe at a global stage we can try to come up with, a this is like really pie in the sky idealism probably, but if we could have a global standard, I think that would go a very, very long way. But definitely very bullish on this. I think it's only a positive sign for the industry at large.
So, to kind of cap this off, if you did have a crystal ball, I know we don't, what would you say that the first regulation we'll see? What do you think that first regulation is, and what do you think the timing of it would be?
Maybe I'll answer it a little differently in what I would like it to be rather than what I think it will be. And it's possible it's possible that it could be this. I think stable coins have been such a hot topic for so long. And I think the regulatory clarity in the US has just not been there. And so there's been, lots of talk about stablecoin regulation for the past couple of years. Um, Stablecoins come up in my conversations all the time with traditional financial institutions, stablecoin issuers themselves, the exchanges as well. So for me, I would just personally love for that to be the first regulation that we see. In terms of when I think we're going to see that, I'm not sure.
I like the idea of leading with stablecoins also, especially in light of the OCC's recent statements about banks can now custody BTC, and there are certain stablecoin activities that are now found to be done by national banks and federal savings associations that we saw come down this week. And this reversal on the debanking of crypto and the public statements by the administration just completely go back on what had previously been colloquially termed, choke point 2.0, where crypto entities and institutions were essentially being kept out of the ability to interact with the traditional finance systems in one way or another. So I definitely agree that stable coins have immense utility, and I think that in terms of their relation to TradFi, I think there is an immense opportunity there. So I do think it's probably at the forefront of legislators' minds. The bill introduced by Senator Haggerty is pretty. At least it looks comprehensive. It does sort of break things up into stable coins that have a total market value of above 10 billion and below 10 billion, and the various ways of regulation and how that would be affected it. So under 10 billion, they'd be subject to supervision by state level regulators. Above 10 billion, then the OCC. So I think that's interesting. I think that's a workable framework. I agree with Caitlin that that'd be great if that's what we started with. Given that Fit 21 already passed the House last year and that there is some talks about revising it, I think it's a possibility we might see that talked about and some action moved on that sometime in the next year, probably before midterm elections is my guess, if I were to take the crystal ball approach, but I'm not positive. But I do find I think it's helpful to think about that. The president's working group gave a 180-day deadline for some sort of proposal of regulatory and legislative framework. Obviously, that's a proposal and not actual enacting of any legislation. But I feel like it gives us some sort of positive feeling that there might be something moving forward and something tangible sometime soon.
Okay. Well, I think you guys have given us a lot to think about, and I'm hoping that we've given our listeners just a little bit of clarity on the 2025 horizon of crypto. So, thank you, ladies, for your time, and thank you, audience, for listening.
Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
having us.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Rabia. Cryptocurrencies have been in the national consciousness for nearly a decade now, but I would not be surprised if 2025 is the biggest year of change yet. And I'm sure many listeners share the excitement, but also an air of caution in seeing what emerges in this space next. Thank you as always for joining us for Clarity, powered by the Thomson Reuters Institute. You can follow or subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform, and don't forget to share with your colleagues and leave a 5-star review. For more data-driven analysis of today's professional services market and in-depth conversations with thought leaders, please visit us online at thomsonreuters.com/institute. Follow us on LinkedIn as well under the Thomson Reuters Institute. Clarity from the Institute is a production of Thomson Reuters. Copyright Thomson Reuters 2025.